Project 1065, Chapter 102, Author's Note. In modern history, young people were perhaps never used so much to fight a war as they were in Nazi Germany during World War II. At the beginning of the war, when things were going well for the Nazis, German children worked on the home front. Like their Allied counterparts in England and America and Russia, they were farmers, messengers, and air raid wardens. They collected raw materials in scrap drives. They put out fires and cleared debris after bombings. They worked in factories and hospitals and welfare agencies. But after the disastrous Battle of Stalingrad in early 1943, in which the Nazis lost more than 285,000 men, Germany became desperate for new soldiers. By that summer, Nazi Germany was officially drafting boys as young as 16 for active military duty. They were given guns, grenades, and rocket launchers, and sent to the front lines with little or no training. Tens of thousands of young German boys died fighting on the Russian front alone. In one extraordinary case, the Nazis created a special fully equipped tank division manned entirely by Hitler youth between the ages of 16 and 18, and tasked them with stopping the Allied advance in France after D-Day. Of more than 20,000 boys in the unit, almost half died in the war. In late 1944, when Germany's defeat was all but certain, Adolf Hitler ordered that every male between the ages of 15 and 60 who were not already fighting must join in the defense of Germany. But in reality, boys and girls as young as 11 years old were recruited to fight. 11 years old. The boys were given rocket launchers and grenades and sent to attack Allied tanks. The girls were taught to operate anti-aircraft guns and told to shoot down enemy planes. During the battle for the city of Aachen, American soldiers reported capturing German soldiers as young as 8 years old. Though unskilled, the German children fought with a ferociousness that frightened Allied troops. The Nazis had told their young soldiers that the Allies were monsters who would torture and kill them if they were captured. So many of them fought to the death or committed suicide rather than surrender. Of the 5,000 Hitler youth who fought in the Battle of Berlin at the end of the war, only 500 survived. In Adolf Hitler's last public appearance in April 1945, he emerged from his bunker underneath what was left of the Reich Chancellery building to award the Iron Cross, Nazi Germany's highest honor, to members of the Hitler Youth who had showed bravery on the battlefield. The youngest of them was 12 years old. Hitler committed suicide just 10 days later, and within a week, Nazi Germany surrendered. But not before it sacrificed an entire generation of young people to a mad dream of world domination. After the war, when the Allies had decided which Nazis to try for war crimes, the Hitler Youth who survived were forgiven because they were children. They had been misguided by their leaders. The Allies decided who were really to blame. As part of the denazification of Germany, the Allies showed films of Nazi death camps to German children who had been members of the Hitler Youth and the Bunddeutscher model. Many of them didn't believe the images they saw. They had been so brainwashed by their Nazi leaders that it took years for them to understand that they, and not the Allies, were the monsters. In the years to come, the boys and girls who had been members of the Hitler Youth came to despise Nazi Germany for turning them into soldiers, making them complicit in the Holocaust, and robbing them of their youth. Project 1065 is a work of fiction set against a very real backdrop of Nazi Germany in World War II. Kristallnacht, the Gestapo, the SRD, the concentration camps, the Hitler Youth, the Edelweiss Pirates, the Aryan education in German schools. All of that is real. Everything Adolf Hitler says to Michael and the other boys in this book is an actual quote from Hitler. I gathered them together from various speeches and interviews so that I wasn't putting words in Hitler's mouth. Adolf Hitler said enough crazy, awful things that I didn't need to make up anything new for him. By 1943, the Americans and British were taking turns bombing Berlin, dropping more than 68,000 tons of bombs on the city, and many Allied bomber and fighter pilots had to parachute into enemy territory when their planes were shot out from under them. Some survived and were ferreted to safety by the resistance movement. Far more were captured and taken into concentration camps or killed. Nazi children were encouraged to spy on their parents and turn them in for violations, which they often did. The Nazis were great burners of degenerate books too, but by 1943, when my story takes place, there weren't many large-scale book burnings anymore, mostly because the Nazis had already rounded up and destroyed all the books they disagreed with. Ireland was officially neutral during World War II, much to the disappointment and disdain of England and the rest of the Allies. The Irish did have an embassy in Berlin during World War II, but Michael and his family are fictional characters. The spying that the O'Shaughnessy family does, however, is based in reality. In the 1980s, declassified documents revealed that the Irish Diplomatic Corps in Europe had been actively collecting intelligence and sending it back to the Allies, at great risk to themselves throughout World War II. Though her army never fought in the war, Ireland, it turns out, wasn't quite as neutral as everyone was led to believe. Real 2 is Project 1065, the actual code name for the secret Nazi project to develop a jet-powered aircraft. In 1944, the Germans succeeded, and the Messerschmitt Me 262 Schwalbe became the world's first operational jet fighter, flying almost 100 miles an hour faster than any Allied plane in the sky. But then it was too little too late, but their invention of the jet engine did change the world. At the end of the war, the Allies snatched at the technology and developed jet planes of their own, and by the 1950s, jet planes began replacing propeller-powered planes in air forces and civilian air travel. Operation Paperclip, the code name for the real Allied plan to recruit or kidnap Nazi scientists to work for the United States, came a little later than I used it here, but both the Americans and Russians played a chess game with scientists throughout the war, trying to capture the best brains in Europe for themselves. Both sides are particularly interested in rocket scientists for the coming space race, and a nuclear physicist who could help develop an atomic bomb. The Manhattan Project, the code name for the U.S. project that created the world's first nuclear weapon, was a much bigger secret than I've made it here. Most people didn't know anything about the development of the atomic bomb until the United States became the first and only nation to use one, dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, in 1945. If you're looking to read more about Nazi Germany and the Hitler Youth, I highly recommend Susan Campbell Bartoletti's award-winning book, Hitler Youth, Growing Up in Hitler's Shadow, which follows 12 different young people growing up in Nazi Germany before and during the war. It was an invaluable resource to me in writing Project 1065.